This Fischer's rule will help you to blunder less and to improve your performance right after watching this video. But on top of that, this game made me genuinely happy. Fischer played 3 brilliant moves in a row. His opponent in return made something even more impressive. And that was really a battle of two geniuses, and I just wanted to share it with you. Fischer is playing black against Salamanca. He was the first Spanish Grandmaster and a 7-time Spanish champion. And for the Breaking Bad fans, that last name already sounds dangerous, and he really delivered. Alright, so we've got the Benoni defense, and Fischer goes g6, fianchettos his bishop to the long diagonal, white builds up the center, so far it's all more or less standard, rook to e8 by Fischer, attacks the central pawn, knight to d2 by white defends the pawn, and now pawn to c4. It looks like white can easily capture this pawn by either a knight or a bishop, but as we're saying, good things come to those who bait. Fischer knew what he's doing. If white were to capture with a knight, that would remove a defender off the pawn. And then Fischer would recapture, destroy the white center, open up the bishop and open up the rook and would have a great game. White does not want that. How about bishop taking c4? White avoided that move as well, because then it kind of leaves the white king a little bit exposed, right? There are no defenders around him and no pawns as well. Fischer would probably play bishop g4, attacking the queen, and then maybe queen to b6, attacking all those other weaknesses, and it feels dangerous for white. The white player did not fall for it. He was a strong grandmaster. He played bishop to f3, solidifying his center, knight to d7 by Fischer, just developing his knight, white castles, and now pawn to b5. Another cool move by Fischer. Somehow a lot of great moves by both sides are actually pawn moves. There's something unique about this game, really. So b5, looks like white can capture this pawn as well. But that's just another trick by Fischer. Knight to b5 would be a blunder. White did not play this because that would allow queen to b6 with a double attack, and white would lose the knight. White realized that his king is exposed along this diagonal and moved it to the corner. And now is a very instructive moment of the game. This pawn on b5 is now hanging for real. What do you do as black? The most natural move to play for black would be just to push the pawn forward, right? You get it out of danger and you attack the knight. However, in that case, white would go knight to b5 perhaps, trying to attack the pawn. You think, okay, not a big deal. I'm going to protect it and also attack this knight. And by the way, it has nowhere to go. Looks pretty good for black until white plays knight takes c4, sacrificing this knight. But getting all his pieces to be very active, this knight on d6 is a real octopus. It's forking the black queen and rook. e5 is coming to attack this knight, and black's position basically falls apart. Fischer, however, did not fall for this trap because he knew the Fischer's rule, right? And his idea was, all the danger comes from your opponent's pieces on your half of the board, and therefore it is your primary duty to not let them come to your territory, and if they're already there, then kick them out as soon as you can. Now, sounds simple, but it's a very profound thing to do. For instance, in this case, he did not play pawn to b4 because he did not want to allow the white knight to jump onto his half of the board. He instead played pawn to a6, just solidifying the situation right here. White is trying to, again, do something. Rook to b8 by Fischer, again, just keeping things under control, keeping the white pieces locked and unable to come forward. Now, white is kind of puzzled. They need to somehow untangle all these pieces. It's hard to complete their development. b4 might be coming at some point when it's suitable for black. Maybe knight to c5 is jumping somewhere forward. White needs to do something, and he goes pawn to e5, which is a nice pawn sacrifice. It is indeed a pawn sacrifice because black does control this square many times. White is losing the pawn right there, but his idea was just to vacate some space for his pieces. Now, this knight is getting active. It opens this diagonal for his bishop, and overall, this is also a passed pawn. White is now having some dangerous activity. And now you can also see how knowing these general simple principles can be so helpful. Because how do you play here as black? It looks like a challenging question. The position is very complicated, there are so many options. But first and foremost, you know that to take is a mistake, right? You do not take right here. If you take for no reason, you only help your opponent to come forward and start attacking you. Therefore, we do not want to do that. Now, next up. We know the Fischer's rule, right? We see that the main danger comes from your opponent's pieces coming forward and attacking you there. Therefore, Fischer knew that if white's piece is about to jump onto his side of the board, you gotta trade it off, push it back, do something. Therefore, he just takes here on e4. White recaptures. Now what do? The threat is still the same. The knight wants to come forward with threats. What do? Trade it off. Fischer goes knight to f6, offering an exchange of knights. And you see how this seemingly simple rule is actually so profound and so helpful. Now, white, of course, doesn't want to just trade off. They're down a pawn. He goes pawn to d6, trying to capitalize on this passed pawn that he has. And Fischer goes bishop to e6, the move that I like a lot, even though computer actually says that it's a mistake. Computer instead suggests that black should try to win this pawn somehow, with all these maneuvers. But, for humans, delaying your development and going after a pawn is such a dangerous thing to do that very often backfires. Therefore, as a coach, I definitely love when people just complete their development, all right? There are just very few opening rules to follow if you don't want to get crushed, right? By the way, it's subject of a different thing. I covered it in my free masterclass. I'll link it down below if you're curious. But for now, white goes knight to c5. It is almost if he knew that Fischer doesn't like that and he wants his pieces to sit on black's half of the board and start putting pressure around, creating some unpleasant things. What does Fischer do? He plays yet another brilliant pawn move, pawn to e4, sacrificing this pawn, just baiting the white knight to come back out of black's side of the board. And notice that as soon as we eliminated this knight, even at the cost of a pawn, now white has no threats anymore, and Fischer quietly plays queen to b6, completes his development. Now he's ready to surround this pawn in a very comfortable way, and now it is white's turn to decide what to do. Indeed, this pawn is about to fall. He needs to see counterplay. White is also down a pawn, by the way, and he goes pawn to f5, which is a brilliant move, this time by white. By the way, these great moves of both sides so far are the least impressive of all the genius moves that they played in this game. All right? Because after pawn takes f5, it turned out that this was not an exchange. This was a pawn sacrifice, because white did not capture on f5. Do you see why? It's because after the trade, it looks good for white until black plays queen takes d6, sacrificing the queen for this back rank checkmate. It turns out that both players realized that, and the move pawn to f5 was not a blunder. It was a great pawn sacrifice because white sees that he's kind of slowly going down and he needs to turn things around. Therefore, he wants to open up the black king. And now indeed the position becomes very complicated. The king is exposed, this passed pawn is still dangerous, and black needs to decide something. By the way, gotta tell you a few words about the white player because he's not very well known. But at the time, he was a local sensation in Spain. At the age of 12, he drew against the world champion Alexander Alekhine, sometimes pronounced Alekhine, and was later used by the Spanish dictator Franco for propaganda, when he was a boy, which potentially later kind of negatively affects his psychology and perhaps didn't let him to fully utilize his talent. But he was a really brilliant player, and so we're kind of having the clash of two prodigies, the Spanish prodigy versus the US prodigy Fischer. That also makes this game so interesting. Now, back to chess. What did Fischer play here? He asked himself, what is white's idea? And the idea is bringing the queen right here to h5 and trying to attack black's exposed king. And we know that Fischer really hated the white pieces sitting on his side of the board, therefore he started asking himself, how do I get rid of that queen? And he played this great maneuver, queen to d4, offering an exchange of queens. White goes queen h5 as planned. Now there are two bishops pointing there, there is a rook right there, and most importantly the queen sitting right next to the black king. But black anticipated that, goes queen to g4, and now the white queen has no way out. It forces the trade of queens, and now black is just a pawn up in an endgame. Nevertheless, white continues with bishop to g5. He sacrifices this pawn on b2 because he decided to capitalize on his own passed pawn on the d-file. Now this rook, together with the bishop, potentially support advancement of this pawn. Looks dangerous, but black just ignores it and goes pawn to b4. White pushes his passed pawn forward, and now rook to d8. Now, Stockfish says that it is a brilliant move because it sacrifices the rook. Bonk. To me, that actually looks like basically the only move to play, and I don't see anything special in there because you don't want to lose the rook, you don't want to let this pawn to be promoted, so rook to d8 is kind of forced anyway, but okay, who am I to argue with Stockfish? So let it be the brilliant move. Now black is about to play pawn to b3, and to keep his passed pawns on the queen side to come forward, white plays bishop a4. Great move by white, protecting the pawn and getting this bishop out of this pawn press. Fischer anyway continues with pawn to b3. Still letting white capture this rook on d8. Again, computer gives it the brilliant mark. I don't fully agree, but okay. Rook to e1. And this is the move that I gave a brilliant mark myself, because When I realized the idea, I just realized how genius these both guys are. Because think about it, when I thought about this move rook to e1, at first I didn't even understand the idea at all. Because I thought, well, what's the difference, right? This rook or this rook doesn't really change anything. And, it doesn't really help this pawn to come forward. It doesn't really seem to do anything. And then I realized that the white player actually anticipated black's next move, because the move rook e1 is completely useless, and it only works if black cooperates and plays the move which seems to be the most natural, just pushing these passed pawns forward. And although it looks like, yeah, just c2 and these pawns are coming forward, black is winning, but this is exactly what white was preparing. It's a very advanced level trap, because now white was going to trade off on d8 and then sacrifice the bishop on b3. And only then we see why the rook needed to stay right there, because if black captures, now the rook can come to e8. That's why the rook needed to be right there. Rook to e8 comes with a check and suddenly turns things around, and now it is white who's winning the game. And Fischer in turn figured this out and played another move which also looks mysterious, king to g7. Now, why is that a brilliant move? And what does it do with all these passed pawns, right? Initially, it seems like just this king move is completely pointless, but it actually serves two purposes. First off, it gets the king out of this check in the trap line that we have seen previously, right? Number one. And number two is Fischer is following Fischer's rule. By the way, he didn't call it Fischer's rule himself. This is how I call it after analyzing Fischer's rules and trying to decode the way he plays and finds correct moves. He noticed there is this bishop on g5 on black side of the board, putting pressure, it's dangerous, and even creates those tricky combinations. Therefore, he asks himself, how can I trade it off or push it back? And he finds king to g7, aiming for bishop to f6, and trade off the bishop. So Fischer's rule is truly genius. Now, white realizes that if he doesn't do anything special, bishop to f6 indeed will trade it off, and he decides, yeah, now it's time to really grab this rook on d8, now rook to d6, just activating his pieces, bishop to f6, solidifying the position, but also giving way for these two pawns to come forward. Now rook to d1, white is still capitalizing on his pawn on d7 and hoping to make use of it. Bishop to g5. A little bit of a strange looking move at first, but in this case it's not easy actually for black to make progress. Looks like he should just push these pawns forward and win the game, but it's not that simple. If you make this pawn move, that allows for the bishop blockade and the pawns are somewhat stopped. If instead white plays pawn to c3, then we already know that white is tricky, right? And he wouldn't allow these pawns to just come forward and promote. He prepared rook takes c6, sacrificing the rook but eliminating the bishop that used to defend this pawn, but not anymore. Now bishop takes b3, takes away one of these two dangerous pawns, threatens this one, and now it's unclear if black can even win. Fischer figured it out and he goes bishop g5. Now rook to b6, white is trying to watch over this pawn on b3, now pawn to h6. Frankly, I don't understand the reason for this move. Maybe Fischer was low on time or just wanted to protect this bishop. There's this general advice that if you keep all your pieces defending, then there's less of a risk for you to blunder it. Again, frankly, not really sure. Rook to c6, white also doesn't have much to do, and maybe somehow he hopes for rook to c8 in the future if black plays not very carefully, but rook to a8. Now Fischer attacks the white bishop, it comes here and bishop takes d7. Another cool move, little tactics, still utilizing the weakness of the back rank. White cannot take this bishop because of the rook a1 back rank checkmate. But we know that in this game, these both guys are on par, and instead white goes pawn to h4. Keeping everything attacked, everything is attacking everything, no one understands what's going on. Well, I should say we don't understand what's going on, right? These two guys clearly knew what they were doing. Fischer takes on c6, white recaptures, now still the black rook is under the attack, the black bishop is under the attack. What does Fischer do? He leaves everything to be hanging and just pushes the pawn forward. And I know we also often leave our pieces hanging, right? But when these two guys doing that, it's genius. Life is unfair. Anyway, white captures the bishop. Now the black rook is hanging. The pawn on h6 is hanging. What does Fischer do? Nothing special. He keeps pushing pawns forward. White captures on h6 with a check. Fischer retreats. And at this point, white resigned. Because even though this rook is hanging, white is up a bishop. But these two pawns are just way too strong. And if the rook moves, black can keep marching them forward, give away everything, and still win the game because of these two so strong pawns. You promote it and you win. What a game. I hope you really enjoyed it. And This approach, this Fischer's rule, helps you minimize blunders in your games. But if you want to know how to develop your own attacks and how to do that in a simple, risk-free, but at the same time very effective fashion, I recommend that you watch this video from Capablanca, where he shows clearly how to do that with that simple brilliancy.